Well, thank you all very much. Many of us have done about 20 budgets together, I think. So I can see some of you said you were still smiling. But this was a long and detailed budget speech, divided into two very different parts actually. Part A, some very big ideas. The question, of course, is can they be implemented? Will the government be able to follow through on all those announcements it made in Part A? Now, this is actually the basic criticism or the basic questions that the government has been asked, that you come up with big ideas, can you follow through? But at least Part A this time had a series of 9 big ideas. So that's been the big question asked of this government. Part B, all about taxes, full of details, totally different from Part A. There's a part with some of it went above my head. That's why we have all of you here. We have the most brilliant Vivek here. So you have to tell us what the details really all add up to. Whatever we got from the speech. And the markets have not been too thrilled with this budget. Actually, they went down 600 points and now they've recovered. And they are now down about 85 points. So they've recovered after a trough. Maybe the tax parts did, except 1 or 2 areas which we shall come to. So Part A, full of big ideas. Question, can they be implemented? Because there are so many big ideas. But it's better to have big ideas than no ideas at all. Part B, huge lot of small ideas, but probably more impactful, and they will be implemented, especially the dividend tax, right?
But I think the dividend tax is really the one that saw that big trough. The minute he announced that there's going to be taxation in the hand of recipients, that's when the markets went down 600 points. And was that the big thing that concerned industry, I guess?
You know, it might have concerned industry a bit, yes, of course. But if you look at the overall sector, overall situation, you have to make money somewhere. And the finance minister has very prudently stuck to his FRBM. And I think when you stick to that, fiscal deficit target, you have to get money from somewhere. So yes, there has been some disappointments in terms of taxation, you might like to say, but overall, it's a great budget. And he's really thought through some of these big ideas. The task now is to see how we can get it. So the mood overall in the room was it was really well thought through, a very well thought through budget.
Prannoy, I guess a lot of people would say over to the RBI now, because by keeping it to 3.5% in the fiscal deficit, right, he's hoping perhaps that Mr. Rajan is going to now cut interest rates further.
Yeah, I think the big question was, which he did tackle, should I go for growth or should I go for conservative fiscal deficit? And he decided to go for prudency. And I think most people have said that was the right decision. Although industry will soon complain that there's not enough growth, there's not enough boost to the economy, but industry always complains, right? So the overall effect, I think, of this budget, after 2 years of routine budgets, this one had big ideas, 9 big ideas. And one area which has really gained is the health sector. Your stock price has gone up. What did you feel?
Well, I'm a happy man today because this is what we had asked for, that we should deepen the access to healthcare because the poor actually are being pushed below poverty line by their healthcare expenses. So this will come as a big relief to families. It will it'll increase their access to all kinds of health services. And even with that amount, you could get in private hospital, government hospital, or an NGO, wherever you want to go. So this is, I think, a big, big move.
It was a big idea to bring in so many more people into the health insurance net. Again, will it be implemented? Will they be targeted? Will there be leakages? Those are the worries, right?
So like you're saying, the devil is in the detail, and monitoring is across the board. All the schemes that were announced today need very intense monitoring and rigid structures. Right. So I think if that can be done, then it's really a win-win for all. Right. And I think this it was important that the social sector actually got the deserved amounts. And you know, there will be disappointment in many people that they want tax rebates, this, that. I think it's a great budget, especially for the health sector.
Well, let me get Shobna in on that as well. You agree?
I think that creating access is the key. And I think in terms of execution, the Jan Aushadhi is already in effect, so they're going to broaden it. We already have health insurance. Now it's become universal. So I think there's greater chance for it to get deeper. And I think that's truly the key in healthcare. On top of that, I think that recognizing the fact that they are super specialities, this will become the destination, which is the unsaid agenda. The government realizes that.
But millions of people still get pushed in beneath the poverty line every time they fall ill. So have we gone far enough towards universal health insurance, especially after this budget?
We have, and I would particularly like to point, I think that the Prime Minister said that he's going to be graded. And I must congratulate him. He gets almost a centum on the way he's addressed the rural market from all aspects. And that's key. I love the word that they said transformative impact with this thing. It's been used correctly throughout. Like Prannoy said, execution might be tough. But at the end of the day, I think that the ideas can and will happen. About dividend distribution tax, I'm an optimist. If we're going to have dividends, please take them. So that means companies are going to have more dividends. So there will be ways for us to make profits, and that's always a good thing.
All right. If you're making profits, it's always a good thing.
Right. Well, the stock market's all about profits. The stock market had fallen in the run-up to the budget. So everything is always compared with expectations. Now it crashed and then recovered from down 600 almost back up the full 600. So it's about compared to already low expectations, but the stock market is not everything. The part A of the budget with big concepts outside really the stock market's really concerned only with part B, and a little disappointed with that part. Our overall anonymous survey, because when you don't have, when you know who's, I always say that in our ad breaks, everybody says, oh, very poor budget in the last 20 years. And when they come on, they say, oh, about 9 out of 10. But so we did an anonymous survey this time, and the average has been 6.7 out of 10. That's the average, which is just about a distinction. Would most of you agree with about 6.7? Okay. Overall, what's your feeling?
Overall, and I'll restrict myself out of the various areas to the infrastructure sector. It was in line with expectations because we expected a big push on roads. That has happened. Between roads and railways together, the government is pumping in 2.18 lakh crores in a year, which is a fairly large amount to spur public expenditure to kickstart the economy. But if you were to ask me to give a label to this year, it is very clear that this year is a rural infrastructure budget. Put together all the elements that the FM has strung together: irrigation, water bodies, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, rural electrification, the electrification of those 1,000 villages, rural roads, and the entire combination of roads, electricity, water, irrigation. And Mandi towns, there's talks about 100 urban clusters of it. It is very clearly the label for infrastructure this year will be certainly a big allocation to roads and railways, but the label would be rural infrastructure, very clearly gets the limelight.
So you do see there is some boost to growth in this budget, boost to demand, particularly from the rural sector. Then how has he maintained a reasonably conservative fiscal deficit?
That is the mystery that I suspect most of us are still grappling with. And once people, the tax experts, start looking at it, what I picked up from the budget was that the net impact of increased taxation and giveaways, the FM said, was 20,000 crores. Now, that's not such a large amount considering the budgetary outlays across so many different sectors. Right. So the million-dollar question is, how does he maintain this 3.5%? At the same time, our ears perked up to his kind of letting us know that he's going to appoint a committee to review the relevance of FRBM itself in a situation where there are global headwinds and other challenges.
I always worry about committees.
Yeah, I wouldn't, but I realize that he's stuck to 3.5 for optics, but he has kept a door open to say, I want to review this whole FRBM commitment. So as the year progresses, and he said not just for the
what you're saying is that the huge increase in outlays, say in infrastructure, etc., have to be matched with cuts somewhere else, which he obviously doesn't announce in your budget. I've cut here, I've cut there.
Because the net tax increase is only 20,000 crores. So how is he maintaining 3.5 unless a large part of what he's committing is actually off-budget resources? Because in irrigation, he said it's 10,000 crore, but there'll be a fund. So a suspicion is a large part of it will be raising of off-budgetary resources, or keeping some options open to relax the FRBM if revenue collections and other stuff is not there.
Right, Prannoy. Well, Mr. Mittal is here. Mr. Rakesh Mittal has been scribbling away furiously. Anything which has caught your eye that you think really needs to be identified as a highlight of this budget?
I think, Vikram, as I said in the morning, the agriculture and rural sector have really been of very high focus, and I must compliment the Finance Minister on that. I mean, clearly, if you see the agri credit going to all-time high of 3 lakh crores, and more importantly, I think where we have seen wastages in the water resources and water reservoirs, I think large amounts have been put in there. Also, to my mind, the direct benefit transfer for the fertilizer as a pilot is a very good step, and I think this needs to be taken to its logical end.
But as Prannoy was saying, 2 of those big ideas were actually, agriculture and the rural economy. Has enough, you think, been done for rural demand? It's been one of the big issues that people have been worried about.
I believe this will help in increasing the rural demand and will boost consumption. And I think if I see on the infrastructure side, 2,18,000 crores for rail and roads, I think that's a huge focus which is being put in, and I believe this will attract private sector investments. And I think the other welcome step is on the 100% FDI in food products manufactured in India. That will also help Make in India plan.
Vikram, the interesting thing in a way, you go behind the numbers, the budget has followed the 3 most effective ministers. The Power Minister, Piyush Goyal, the Roads Minister, Mr. Gadkari, and the Railways Minister, Mr. Prabhu. These are the 3 ministers. The budget has said, okay, you're doing well, go with it. And hopefully that will make a difference because they will actually be able to implement. But Kiran, coming to the focus on the agricultural sector and this big thrust on Aadhaar and Manrega, it's good to see a government taking on the previous government's policies and carrying on with it without any political agenda, saying this is good for the country, we reject a lot of the other things you did, but these 2 are fine and we'll go with it. These will make a difference. Aadhaar, he's going to bring in another bill. There are a lot of bills he's promised, actually. So a bill that will make Aadhaar much stronger and make sure there's less leakage. Do you welcome that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to me, one of the exciting things were the number of mentions where Aadhaar and the whole digital space comes in to actually link the real economy with the cyber economy. And Aadhaar is a critical part of that. Right. Bills worry me because, we've seen bills which were supported by one party and in power and opposed by them. Yeah. But the Aadhaar one, hopefully you go through and you put it rightly. I think these are ones that are important for the nation. And linking Aadhaar, we've seen the success already where it's been linked, like in bank accounts and now in the gas subsidy thing, and if they link it to fertilizer, I think that's great. He's also mentioned an e-market for agriculture, which is phenomenal. You've heard more mentions of various things coming in for government processes. So the whole use of digital capabilities there. The one area I must say of disappointment there in terms of a mention, hopefully it's in the fine print somewhere, and you heard good comments on infrastructure. To me, one key infrastructure as we move ahead is the digital infrastructure. And the whole BharatNet, which is there to lay out fiber to 250,000 gram panchayats, started a long time back. Again, a continuation from a previous government to this. I'm hoping that there are big allocations there. Nothing was mentioned. It's a critical part of infrastructure. We should counter infrastructure.
But how do you follow through on it? Yes.
And then, of course, implementation, as we all said, or execution, if you please. I think those are critical.
But at least the ideas are there. So
absolutely.
At least it's the first step.
Just one more mention.
Which I found the other budgets, his other 2 budgets didn't have these 9 big
so there
ideas.
There are at least something there. It's not a pedestrian budget, which is doing a little bit more of this, little bit of that. Just one other comment, if I may, on the rural side. Very good thing to see the increase in the PM's Gram Sadak Yojana, because all the studies have shown that it creates tremendous employment in the states that are most backward. Unlike Manrega, which has been successful, I think, in many ways, but where most of the money goes into the advanced states. So this is very good. The other one of some concern, and I see both my colleagues who made comments have gone away on that, on health. What concerns me, and I'm wearing a different hat now talking of rural areas and health, is the emphasis on insurance. I think that's good in some ways, but it cannot and must not be a substitute for basic healthcare at the primary level in the rural areas, which is the crux of making sure that people don't fall into debt. And I don't see any mention of big allocations there. This is an easy one in a way to say insurance and put a small amount, the rest will come and they'll be insured. It's a good step, but it's not enough.
You're right.
It's necessary, but it's not sufficient at all. We need primary
district health centers, local health centers on our
election
trips.
They're in terrible shape.
They're terrible shape.
And unless you...
But Prannoy, couple of our guests have to leave us. I'm going to quickly get some comments from them, starting off with you, Mr. Vikram Kirloskar. Obviously, industry has not been doing well, capital goods sector in particular. There's been really, really downbeat. Is this going to see a kickstarting in investment?
Well, let me talk on the auto sector. Auto sector has grown in the last 2 years, although from a very low level of the previous couple of years, and it's expected to grow this year. But we still have a lot of excess capacity in the auto sector. Many companies have 30-40% excess capacity. So I don't see terrific investment in capacity coming up in the next couple of
And
years.
they've taxed cars. The cars
Well,
are going to be
the
more
car
expensive.
taxes-
in a sector which is not doing too well.
Well, it's still 6-7% growth. So anyway, I think it's better than a lot of other sectors.
Right.
The tax is okay, provided they said it's a green tax. It's for the for pollution. If this money is used to help remove or incentivize Euro 1, Euro 2, BS1, BS2 cars off the road, that will really, it'll be good for the industry, and we'll have no issue with this at all.
But any
So
tax incentives for hybrid cars or electric cars?
Yeah, so this money gets used for electric cars, hybrid cars, for removing old vehicles off the road.
Right.
I think that should be the way to use this tax, and I hope something like that will crop up.
So when you're coming
in the
up
years
with
to come.
something like the Tesla,
We don't need we have a hybrid Camry, which I think is doing extremely well. Thank you.
But Prannoy, one of the other major focuses of the entire budget was obviously simplification, ease things, don't have too much, which is obviously, as I was saying earlier, very bad news for Ernst & Young and PwC, both of which are here. So let's get Rajiv Himani of Ernst & Young to tell us, has enough been done for simplification, or are consultants still going to be absolutely important?
Consultants will be very important as the economy grows. Like
Unbiased.
media, I think consultants will thrive. So, no, but I think I would say that the big thrust of this budget is first is to widen the tax base. So there's 1% TDS and everything. The second would be, I think, a lot of emphasis on dispute resolution. Now, what goes through, what doesn't go through, we'll have to see. But a lot of emphasis on dispute resolutions of various kinds. I think those two would be the big sort of takeaways. And
The sort of a deal that he's put forward, is it a good enough deal for many companies to pay the tax, we won't pay penalties or interest? Do you see a lot of people accepting that offer?
I think the VDIS one will be a good deal if it goes through. For the others, I think it will be very case-to-case specific. I don't think it will be slam dunk. But for some of them, because there are 3 or 4 categories that he's brought in. One is, when do you have to pay penalties, the options that are available with CIT appeals. The other is, the old cases, just pay tax and don't pay interest and penalty. The third one is 45%. So I think there are various cases. I would think the 2 or 3 other things is the corporate tax rate reduction, which everyone was hoping hasn't come through. But I think also the SEZ deferral to a 2020. Everyone was thinking that it'd probably be 2017, 2018. So I think for the IT companies, that's a big relief. I think the accelerated depreciation coming down to 40%. So lots of companies that were getting 100% depreciation on some items. I think so rates will congregate more around the MAT tax rate. So I think those are some interesting suggestions. But the thing with all these things is you'll have to see with the fine print that what else has he got in there. But the SEZ piece, I think, was a good positive relief for lots of companies.
All right.
right? Ajay Sriram, 2 positives and 2 negatives that you got out of this budget.
I think one, the focus on rural India and on agriculture was very powerful. I think the sort of details the FM went into, I've never seen this sort of elaboration before. Secondly, also in terms of covering all sectors of the Indian people, I think he's covered that very comprehensively across the board. I think that's positive. Right. The only issue I would say which is not clear yet, maybe somewhere in the fine print, really ultimately a lot of issues, agriculture, land, labor, a lot of them are concurrent subjects. How does one actually get all these things implemented at the state level? I think that is something which is not clear, and the worry is
that we will make some model bills, and it's up to each state to voluntarily accept them or not.
See, that was done like the APMC Act, which was done 5 years ago, and he said only 12 states have adopted that. That's it. Yeah. So they might make laws in the center, but how to get the states to actually implement it so the benefit goes to the people?
Right.
I would feel there should be some mechanism to leverage the states and push them to implement policies which are good for the people. It's left too much of a freedom right now. So I think that's one issue which needs to be clarified
be implemented
further.
by states, yes.
And the second, I think, is always a challenge across the board for every government for the last 50 years. There's implementation. Yes. I think that's something which is required. I think the direction is good.
Especially when you have so many big ideas.
Yeah. And I think, frankly, I've never heard, to my mind, such an elaborate presentation covering all aspects of the economy and the people. I think from both sides, it's a very positive budget indeed.
Vikram?
Well, we do have Mr. Sunil Munjal with us here. Your take on, A, the big ideas that Prannoy was talking about, those 9 specific steps that he outlined, and what he actually said could be done about them, the specifics of those plans.
Can I just take a step back and look at this from a, it's like a workman's budget. He's actually covered so many areas. If I look at what we had recommended from CI's side, it appears that everything has got covered, whether it was rural economy, agriculture, irrigation, infrastructure, strengthening bank balance sheets, helping the dispute resolution mechanism get better, simplifying tax administration. So it's a long list of things that got covered, and large spends have got announced, whether it's the road or the combined spend on roads and rail that he talked about. It's pretty significant. Focus on startups, creating clusters, and helping specific categories of startups for SC, STs, etc. When you put all of this together, I was actually a bit surprised when he said he will still stick to the fiscal deficit target. And I have not seen the numbers yet, but if he's able to do that, frankly, full marks to him. It is also, in some sense, coming together of the vision that the Prime Minister has been laying out for the last 2 years, in some sense putting the building blocks in place, whether it's the regulation of Aadhaar. I don't know how many people notice the LPG thing is a phenomenal game changer, by the way. If you give LPG connections to the poor households, you're doing 3 or 4 things. You're also cutting down, you're also reducing the incentive to cut wood across the country, which is what is used today for burning in those stoves. So there are little things.
And a major health benefit too.
Exactly. And there is focus on health. So there are a number of little things which have a pretty profound impact on the overall system. That he's raised taxes at the top end, I think in some sense was expected. And I would imagine you need to raise some resources. While widening, he's also raised some of the resources, whether it's come from the clean energy cess, or it comes from raising the cess on expensive cars. There are 2 or 3 areas in which he's raised resources. I don't see anybody cribbing about that too much, because if you can manage the books in this manner, I would imagine we are all happy to see industry grow. If you can actually create a multiplier through low-cost housing, and encourage infrastructure, you need to see consumption grow. You need to see crowding in of private investment based on that.
All right. Any major disappointments for you?
I can't think of any one major one, but I would have liked to.
We'll talk to you in the break.
I would have we can talk right now. I would have liked to see more detail in some of the, and it may actually be there, so I don't know. I've not seen the fine print. I need to see the fine print, but broadly, it's hard to find fault with what he's announced.
Right. Great. I guess one area which the economic survey did make a major, actually, eye-opener for all of us, and a very important point is that in our subsidies, 103,000 crores of subsidies go to the not poor, the rich. And I don't know whether enough has been done to make sure that the rich don't get those subsidies anymore. Maybe targeting will help a bit, but perhaps that focus, which the economic survey really made, 100,000 crores to the rich that you and I get for, you get, and Dorab gets.
Prannoy, this may actually be part of the implementation which we don't know about right now.
Exactly.
Because as Aadhaar becomes a mandatory thing, which I think is a phenomenal move,
wonderful,
by the way, another game changer, which went off quietly in just a line that he mentioned.
in fertilizer also.
And direct, there's a starter pilot, they said, for fertilizer subsidy directly to farmers.
Right.
If you can do that, you will help both the farmer and the industry.
Okay, let's just go through the 9 points, the big points they raised, just in a very short, staccato way. First, he talked about agriculture, and then a whole section on that. Then rural employment, which was separate, but actually it's still part of the agricultural area. The third was, again, social sector health, a lot of focus on insurance in the rural sector, and on LPG to rural families. Then education, that was the fourth. Big push for infrastructure, mainly roads, electricity, and which was the third? Road, electricity, and railways. Fifth was financial sector reform, which perhaps was a bit disappointing. Then there was the ease of doing business, another big point. Whether that will actually happen, is up to the tax authorities and various others. And then, of course, tax reforms and changes in that. So one of the things which T.N. Nainan just wrote about, and we miss him here actually because he's chosen a much more relaxed life, lucky guy. He says that the whole thrust has been from focusing on the middle class and pushing them up to the poorer sector and to Garibi Hatao. It's a subtle change, and you do see that in this budget. That's what Nainan says. Do you kind of agree with that change on the political front, Shekhar?
I think most certainly. In fact, if you hear the first part, this is an agro-povertarian budget. And it does look like government is responding to the setbacks it's had. And the setbacks, in fact, it anticipates this year because in 4 of the 5 states, it doesn't feature very much anyway. So there is a correction. And correction, I'm not saying in a value judgment sense. There's a change. There's a shift.
Correction.
There's a shift. So to that extent, I call it the most political budget speech in a very long time. It's almost like the kind of speech, if you just hear the first half an hour, it could have been delivered by Chaudhry Charan Singh, right? But then if... I think it had much better... Well, first half an hour, no. But as you go on towards the last part, I think, and I say this positively, it is not exactly an ease of doing business budget, but it's an ease of paying tax budget, which actually means the same thing as ease of doing business, because there is nothing more frustrating to honest taxpayers in India than being chased by the tax departments, lawyers, chartered accountants, because nobody accepts an honest taxpayer's word at face value. So you just carry on and on and on, and the entire system has been built in such a way that process becomes the punishment. And that leads to arbitrage and corruption in the entire system. I think if some of these reforms are carried through, they will make a lot of the middlemen earn their money a hard way. So I welcome those changes. I think it's a lawyer's mind at work, and it's a very sharp mind at work. There is also a hidden amnesty scheme whereby you can pay a little more penalty, etc., and get out of it. The amount of penalty that the discretion has been taken away from the assessing officer, amount of penalty she can lay has also been reduced. So all these things are reducing arbitrage in the system. Right. So I think this is reducing corruption, and this will encourage more people to pay taxes honestly. And if they are treated with respect going ahead, I think you will see many benefits from it.
And as you say, the thought is there now. Let's see the income tax department implementing.
Well, there'll be a lot of resistance because a whole economy has been built around this. But I think this is one Ganga Snan. If we take a dip this time.
Got the Ganga, now you have to snan.
All right, well, Prannoy, we do have Mr. Arvind Parangreh here, actually, who's joining us on an OB. Mr. Keki Mistry is also with us. Mr. Parangreh, first across to you, sir. We saw a thrust of some of this in the economic survey. What is your take on the basic message that we seem to have got from this budget? What seems to have been the basic underlying principle?
I sort of see this as a well-rounded budget. So it covers all the areas and makes changes in virtually all areas of the economy. But let me go over a few things that would sort of give you some sense of how I see the budget. First of all, I think, it's not much has been made of this, but we see finally the end to the plan and non-plan distinction. So I think hidden within that is an important change that is likely to happen in the years to come. Fiscal consolidation, there had been a lot of debate on this, what the finance minister was going to do. At the end of the day, he has stuck to the 3.5% fiscal deficit target. So I certainly very much welcome that because I had wished for it also. The big, I think, area, as your commentators have been saying, on which really the budget has laid greatest emphasis is the rural areas, so irrigation, rural development. I think this is where lots of action is. I have, as an economist, traditionally felt that if you give people electricity and roads, much of the rest of it they can figure out. And I think on both of those fronts, the budget goes in a big way. Electrification, rural electrification, has continued to receive its high priority that it should. On roads, a huge jump in the expenditure on the PMGSY, the Gram Sadak Yojana. So we got, we'll see some action there, enhanced, accelerated. Another important one, I think, which has perhaps not received enough attention is that the finance minister has opened the agricultural sector, I mean, in terms of marketing to the foreign direct investment. So, this is an important progress actually, because in terms of creating this supply chain from the farm to the market, it has been kind of felt that, this goes back to the original reform of the UP on opening the FDI to the foreign retailers. And while this doesn't go all the way, at least, in terms of the agricultural side, the sector has been opened
So
up
can
to
I just interrupt you there?
100% to the foreign direct investment.